Cat TV is celebrating 30 years of community media. Help support Cat TV's next 30 years by becoming a member today. Your membership will help us continue covering meaningful, local content. Thank you for supporting your local community media station.
October 24th meeting of the Bennington Select Board. My name is Jeannie Jenkins, and I have the pleasure of chairing this board, and I'm going to ask my fellow board members, two of whom are on phone, to please introduce themselves.
Starting with me. Hi, I'm Gary Corey. Welcome.
Hi, I'm Tom Haley. Nice to see everyone tonight.
Sarah?
Hi, it's Derek Harris.
Jim?
Hi, it's Jim Carroll. I don't think I had COVID, but I'm not feeling very well and didn't want to take any chances.
Jean Connor.
And I'm Bruce Lee Clark, and I don't think I have anything.
Good, because you're here.
I'm here.
Okay, and so we appreciate both Sarah and Jim being here and also making sure that they don't infect any of us if they might be infectious. First order of business tonight is we'd like to adjust the agenda to add a COVID update by Dr. Trey Dobson, who is the Chief Medical Officer at SVMC, our local hospital. And thanks to Gary for suggesting this. Like to put it on the agenda just before public comment. Gary, do you want to make a motion?
I would love to make that motion.
All right. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. I think
Whatever.
Tom beat you.
Okay.
Any discussion? If not, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Bye.
Any opposed? Nope. Okay, great. We'll make that adjustment. So then, first up, as always, is the Pledge of Allegiance. Tom, would you lead us in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Tom. And then, Jean, would you please read the vision statement which guides our work?
Bennington is a welcoming, engaged, inclusive, resilient community where everyone, regardless of identity, shares in our vitality and benefits from an outstanding quality of life.
Thank you very much. All right, so next up is the consent agenda. For the purposes of discussion, could I have a motion?
So move.
It's you. Second? You second? Okay, great. Okay, any questions or comments on either the minutes of October 10th or the warrants or the liquor licenses? Hearing none, then I will ask all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, good. Excellent. All right, so next up is Dr. Dobson.
Well, good evening, everyone. Actually, interestingly, even though things seem to change so much, a lot of what I'll say is the exact same things we'd be saying a year and a half ago, really. It's quite remarkable. First off, just the prevalence that you read about. I know everyone's very well read on this, so I don't want to repeat what you already know, but the prevalence is increasing in New England in particular, maybe not around the country at this moment. It's really hard to figure out exactly what data is out there because, you know, we're not getting reports on testing anymore. Everybody knows that. And that's actually okay. It's more on hospitalizations, which is important, and then sick people that come to the emergency department and test positive, but maybe not necessarily need to go in the hospital. Those are important numbers too. So if you look at the map, you know, Bennington just tries to be different, I guess, than the rest of the state all the time, and it always has that nice bright color to the background of what's been green for many months. You got to take that a little grain of salt because the way those numbers are derived includes the entire area of Albany. for hospitalizations. And it's very complicated because it's not just the numbers of hospitalizations, it's the capacity, which is measured in a very complicated way. So don't take it so literally, but you can look at it as an indicator, and there are cases that are increasing. At SVMC, we've been, usually typically less than 4 patients that are admitted to the hospital for COVID-19. We happen to be double that today at 8. I don't know if that'll be a trend or if that's just a blip, because you could have asked me 4 months ago and I might have said, oh, today we happen to be at 8, normally we're at 4. It's very hard. We want to practice anecdotally. We want to look at things and say, look at cause and effect, and we have to be careful and not do that, especially with such a serious situation as COVID-19 has been. So prevalence is increasing. It's probably driven by a combination of things. New variants, for sure. You can be pretty cool and try to remember all the new variants for the month, but that gets tiring because then they change and they flip and they get different letters. I think the idea is the virus continues to evolve. Fortunately, right now, it is not becoming more virulent. I say that today. That's been also true a year and a half ago. If anything, maybe less virulent. But we don't know where that will go, and we can't drop our guard on that. Unfortunately, even though it's become less virulent or about the same, by the way, virulence means the ability to cause severe disease. So severe disease, it is evading some of our treatments. So some of the treatments that I actually talked about a year and a half ago, even 8 months ago, became useless because they were no longer, especially the monoclonal antibodies, which have a particular shape that that sees the virus and it binds onto it. But if the virus changes its shape, the monoclonal antibody is no good. We still have treatments, though, that work. They work the same today that they did a year ago. The first line of treatment is Paxlovid, and I'm mentioning this intentionally because if you are over the age of 50, and in particular if you're over the age of 65, and you test positive, you should seriously consider the medication. It's highly effective. It has very little side effects. And if you wait until you get really, really sick, it doesn't work as well. It's like lots of medicines. If you have a really, really bad headache and you get a headache that gets really severe and you try to take some Tylenol for it, it doesn't work near as well as if you'd taken that Tylenol early before the headache. Maybe not the greatest analogy, but it is true. And that's how you get these numbers of 90% effective. If you said, how about if I wait until people get in the hospital and then give it to them? It's not near that effective. So 65 and above and you test positive, even with mild symptoms, you should start it. If you're 50 and above, you could certainly consider it in that way. The hospitalizations still tend to be in those that have not been up to date on their vaccination, at least fully boosted, and that hasn't changed much. It also, the elderly, so the older you are, even if you are boosted, the more likely you are to get the disease. None of that has really changed, and so it drives the importance of being up to date with vaccination. By the way, I know some people have been opposed to certain types of vaccines, and there's a lot more variety out there right now, and we still give those up at the former campus at SVC every Tuesday, Thursday. We're the only place in the state that's doing this, and we have hundreds of people each day. And I don't know what's happening in the rest of the state or in other places. They are not going to pharmacies to get vaccinated because it's too complicated. If you can get in, that's great. And we're going to try to keep it open through the end of the year. It's difficult from a resource standpoint and financially, but we feel we can do that and then reassess. So I'll stop there, and if you have questions, you can always ask now, but you can always catch me offline. It's pretty easy to figure out how to get a message to me.
Great, thank you. Any questions from the board? Yes, Jean.
I work in Massachusetts, and they're having difficulty getting vaccines. Are Mass residents allowed to come get their vaccines at our hospital? They are?
Yes.
That's what I thought. Okay, I'll tell them.
Yeah. Sarah, Jim, do you have a question?
Do you have a question, Jim? Jim?
Sarah, do you have a question?
I do not. I just like to comment and put rumor stress. I currently am recovering from COVID, so please, people still be cautious, be careful. And I've had to use my inhaler more than I'd like to have ever used my inhaler in my life. So thank you for the update, Dr. Dobson.
You're welcome. And you actually point out something that, if you think about it, reason-wise is fine. It's okay to not behave in the way we were doing a year and a half ago. We have better treatments, we have better things, and still be not so complacent that you ignore it. So if you are living with someone who is highly vulnerable, you still take precautions, particularly when you travel. The transmission rate just shoots up because people are coming from multiple different areas. So if you don't want to wear a mask everywhere, which I get, I'm not wearing one myself right now, but when I travel, I wear a mask because I know the chances of getting the flu or colds or anything is so much higher, and it's pretty easy to put it on for travel.
Great. Any questions from the community?
Janie? If you caught COVID recently, are the variants something that you need to worry about, or are you protected from those variants?
Yeah, it's a question we get all the time, and that is, and I'll rephrase it a bit too. If you had COVID recently, what are your chances of getting COVID because there's new variants? Could they evade your immune response? When should you get a booster? And those types of questions. And the truth is, you're eligible to get a booster as soon as you recover from COVID-19. And for those that are highly immunocompromised, that's the case. They should do that. For example, if you get chemotherapy and you get COVID-19 and your immune system is down, as soon as you recover, you should get a booster. And the idea is why. And the reason is because a booster is predictable and your response is predictable. When you get COVID-19, it's not predictable. So you could have a great response. In fact, most people do, but you may not. That's the same thing with chickenpox, the same thing with other viruses. So that's why we say that. If you get COVID-19 and you feel ill and you're ill for a few days and you know you had the disease, you tested positive, then you can hold off for about 4 months, 3 to 4 months on getting a booster. That's, again, a question that we receive often. But back to specifically yours, Gary, yes, as variants evolve, eventually there'll be a variant that is different enough from what you had or what another person had that you're susceptible to it. I think it's really important that you stress to your friends and colleagues that they see someone get a booster and then they see that person 2 months later get COVID-19 or 4 months later and they think it doesn't work. And that's just not how vaccines were ever designed, or at least most of them. They are designed to prevent severe illness. And look at the hospitalizations and look at the death rates. And that is not due to chance, it's not due to intervention, it's due to vaccination, period.
Thank you. Gene? Trey, are we still just dealing with the Pfizer vaccine? Is that the only one that's still available?
Yeah, we actually have 3 now. So we have Pfizer, Moderna, and Novavax. The Pfizer and the Moderna are built with a particular type of technology that everyone's heard about because it's called mRNA, and it just sounds cool. And then there's Novavax, which is the old standard protein subunit. And I'm happy to talk to someone more offline if they really do have questions or concerns and go over the differences. Both have been shown to be effective against these Omicron variants that we keep seeing.
I actually did think of a question. The RSV, increase in RSV, that's not COVID related at all. It's just coincidental.
It's not related directly to COVID. It could be indirectly related to the fact that we've been apart for a couple of years and now we're coming together, and that could be a part. There could be some chance involved there. It is true. We're seeing higher incidence of RSV, which, for most part in adults is a cold, but in young kids it can be very severe.
Anyone else on the board or staff? All right. Anyone in the community? Well, yeah. Anyone in the community? Sam.
Sam Racino of Bennington, Vermont. This is going to sound redundant, but as you know, Halloween's upon us. What's the feeling on trick-or-treating for Bennington and surrounding communities?
Well, I'll just give some remarks on that. First off, there is no right answer to that. It's all risk assessment, which we talked about, and I think it's a great question. And I would really say the same thing, being redundant. If someone's highly vulnerable, it's a good idea to not have a lot of people in the house. It is completely fine to have kids come up to the door, stay a distance, and participate. If that causes someone anxiety, then don't do it.
Other questions? So thank you so much for coming on very short notice. I think this is really helpful. We're both happy and sad to see you. And I'm thinking we we may want to see you again in November
Sure,
if you are
sounds great.
available. All right. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. All right. All right. Sobering news. So next up is public comment. And I think we only have one person who is speaking on something other than the agenda item. Donald, I'm understanding you're wanting to discuss whatever, comment on whatever's being discussed, so we'll hold yours. Nancy White, you want to speak on the cemetery.
Nancy White, Bennington. For the past couple of months, some of us have been reading online that there's been activity in the village cemetery behind Stewart's on Main Street, the old Stewart's. And I went up today and saw the destruction up there. You cannot begin to understand how much damage people have done. And I'm asking the select board tonight to come up with some type of not a law, I can't think of the word I want, come up with something so that if people in Bennington are in our cemeteries after night, they can get fined. Because nobody can justify what happened. There's no reason for people to be in the cemeteries at night. Some of that damage can't be repaired. Those stones are too old. A lot of the people up there are the people that built this town. A lot of our streets are named after the people. You have a lot of veterans, and it's just pure disrespect. So I'm asking you to come up with something so we can try to prevent this. If somebody's caught up there in the future, it's an automatic $500 fine. Thanks.
Thank you, Nancy. It's definitely something to consider. Okay, anyone else for public comment? All right, all right. The next up is the Ben High redevelopment project. And I just want to remind folks that back in fall of 2021, the select board had asked staff to reach out to town departments, BCRC, Health Department, BBC, and others to help compile an initial list of projects for ARPA funding. And this was followed by a month-long public comment period and a presentation to the select board and the community in March of 2022. And since then, we've been getting regular updates on priorities as they have been moving through the process. Most recently, we had a very well-attended special meeting last Wednesday on Ben High, and this is a second meeting following that. We had experts here then, and we have several of those experts here again today, including John and Zach Hale and town staff who have been working on this project. Dan has the next steps up here, and that is really what we are focusing on this evening. So I think, Dan, I'll turn it over to you and tell us what you want to tell us.
Great. Well, thank you very much, and thank you for recapping so well. It saves me some time, so I appreciate that. But again, we're happy to answer any questions on what we've already discussed if they haven't been answered at a previous session. Just a couple of quick updates after our public meeting the other evening. Jonah has updated the website with more information. I think folks, if they go and check out that website, there's lots and lots of information that I think will be very helpful for folks to understand the work done today on the project. Including on that update was the PowerPoint presentation that we presented at the public meeting. That's up on the website. So we'll continue to do that. I know Jonah is also, as questions come in at, what's the info at benningtonvt.org, is that as questions come in on that email, Jonah answers those and posts those answers online. So if you ask a question and it hasn't been answered before or isn't already in the materials, Jonah will post that up there for everyone to see. So we hope that will be kind of an ongoing conversation as people have questions about the project. I know that Jonah just posted one today. So tonight we are going to review the recommendations that the staff has made to the select board about proceeding with this project. And also we are here to answer any questions that haven't been answered previously. As Jeannie mentioned, we have John and Zach Hale here today to talk about the residential portion if you folks have questions, and we have town staff here this evening to talk about the town portion of the project. So happy to answer any questions from the board or from the public as we proceed. Just wanted to go over quickly the recommendations that staff has made. And that's really why we're here this evening, is to request that the select board authorize these recommendations or modify them and authorize us to do something slightly different. But that's why we're here this evening. The first one is really to formally commit up to $2 million in municipal ARPA funds for the construction phase of the project. And this is with a big proviso, subject to staff identifying the additional funds necessary to proceed with the project. So we all know that $2 million is probably not enough to proceed with the community portion of the project, and we're not asking for authorization to expend those construction funds now. We're only asking for the commitment to expend those if we bring back to you folks a plan that you all feel adequately funds the project. So that's the number one ask, and we ask that because it's very important for leveraging additional funds. Until we have that formal commitment, we really have no way to leverage additional funds, because that's the first thing every funder is going to look for, state, federal funder, even private funders with regard to the residential portion, is a stake that the town has in the project. So that's number one. The second thing we would look for you guys to authorize us to do is, and of course we would bring back any formal agreement for you folks to look at and sign off on, but we're asking for you to allow us to formalize the partnership with Hale Resources so that we can complete the redevelopment of the entire Ben High property. Remember, it's two sections: community space funded by the town, residential space funded by Hale Resources and their investors. So that's number two. We're asking you to allow staff to continue its efforts to identify cost savings and also to quantify exactly all the costs for the project. We're also asking you to allow us to continue our pursuit of funding so that we can identify and secure funding sources for the project. And we're also asking for, finally asking for you to allow us to explore ownership models to maximize the funding, as we talked about before. Some ownership models allow us to use tax credits, some don't. Some allow us to use certain funding that's available to private parties versus public parties. So the public-private partnership will allow us to explore lots of different funding sources, and ultimately we'll have to determine what the best way for us to control our portion of the property and for Hale Resources to control their portion of the property. And that's really about it. We know that it should and will come with a direction to the staff to report back to you folks in a reasonable period of time. We think we can give some really good updates and hopefully some good direction on proceeding in about 90 to 120 days as we track down funding sources and try to minimize costs. So that's really why we're here this evening. Those are our requests. You may have other directions for us. Certainly we'll be happy to hear about those. But in the meantime, don't know if you folks have questions or if you want to open it up to the public for questions. But
I think I want to start with the select board because we didn't get to make any comments or have questions on Wednesday night. So is there anyone that has any questions or comments that they want to make now? Otherwise, I'll open it to the public. Well, and Gary, were you?
I have a couple.
You have a couple? Okay, we'll start with you and just go down the line.
The $2 million that we'll commit, will that include the feasibility money, or will the feasibility money be on top of that?
So that $2 million is for the actual construction of the project. So it will include things like final design, et cetera, but not the feasibility portion where we, for instance, where we paid for the structural engineer, the initial design from the architect, the environmental reviews, et cetera. That's from the prior authorized funds that you folks, authorized town to pursue. Okay.
And then the other, in the 90 to 120 days, do you think we'll see an interim update, or will that be?
We will do an interim update if you'd like. we'd kind of committed to try to come back every 30 to 60 days, so we're happy to do that. And you just let us know.
Just so we know how things are going, I think.
Yeah, no, I'll promise you, if we hit a showstopper, we'll be back. Because we're not going to waste time if there's something that just stops us in our tracks. But if we are proceeding as we hope in the right direction, we'll be happy to also come back and say, hey, this is where we are. We're looking at these funding sources. This one looks really good. We've hit a dead end on this one, and et cetera. And we'd be happy to, as we tick off some of these things, if we come to a formal agreement with Hale Resources, we'll be back to you folks for that before it gets executed. Obviously, staff doesn't have the authority to do that. We have the authority to come up with a document to present to you, and then you folks can either accept it or reject it or ask for changes. So as those things happen, we'll be coming to you. We may come back to you to assign applications for funding, et cetera. So there will be a lot of reasons for us to come back to you before that's up. I hope, actually, because that means we're making progress. But we're happy to come back as often as you like.
Yeah, I think we'd like to see that progress as it moves forward. Do you expect in the 90 to 120 days that you'll have secured financing, or will it be identifying the?
I think if we are hoping to identify it all and have hopefully secure some of it, but probably not all of it. And so it'd be really, really optimistic, I think. I'm looking at Shannon because she's our #1 fundraiser. It'd probably be optimistic to say we have them all 100% secure, because some of these have longer application periods. We might be waiting for a board to make a decision on whether or not they're going to fund us. We can't promise that we'll have all that in place within 120 days.
Okay,
thanks. I've actually been approached by more people than on any other issue that I've dealt with in my time on the board here. Almost all of it positive, a vast majority of it. But I have had a few people approach me concerned that this is somehow going to affect the property taxes of people around town. Could you speak to that at all?
So, yes, I can. I mean, I will tell you that as far as the capital costs are concerned, constructing this building, constructing the improvements, et cetera, our goal is to keep it neutral to the taxpayer. Obviously, there is one portion of the funding stack, which we've talked about, we've been very transparent about. It is a bond. It's a TIF bond, however, so it does not impact taxes directly. It would be, the money would be generated by the taxes on this particular property, so there's no impact on the general taxpayer. So that being said, we're going to have 30,000 extra square feet of space, and we're going to have to maintain that. So there may be a minor impact, marginal impact on taxpayers, because we may have additional cleaning supplies, we may have some additional folks have to maintain it, et cetera. We hope some of that will be offset by rents from some of our tenants, but I can't promise it'll be absolutely no impact whatsoever, but it will be, the way that we're pursuing it is that we are only looking for very minor impacts, if any, but can't promise there won't be some, because we are going to get a huge asset with responsibilities in maintaining it and keeping it up going forward.
Property values could go up. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Sarah, do you have any questions at this moment?
I do, yes. At this point, for the ask of authorizing to request funds, to pursue funding, do you anticipate any added costs, or is that just like work on the part of town staff?
So if I heard the question correctly, it's specifically about pursuing funding?
And additional costs, is that right, Sarah?
Yes.
So additional costs in regard to pursuing funding. So I'm going to look to Shannon. I don't think we don't.
Will you just anticipate that being like work on town staff, or do you anticipate any additional costs on top of that at this point?
To pursue it, so will it just be town staff? Will it be town staff time, or will it
be town staff time? In other words, so it's not like a bank financing where you have to pay a application fee or something like that. So it won't be that. That being said, there may be certain things that individual funders want. Like they may want a formal phase one. Now we've done our environmental review, but to do a phase one might cost a little bit extra money for them to do the formal report. So there may be those sorts of things, but nothing extraordinary. It is mostly our effort to track down that funding and get together the applications. Some of those supporting documentation may cost some money, but we think we have done most of that legwork already.
Great. Does that answer your question?
Sorry, you just said about applications and then I didn't get part of that.
That there might be application fees if they had to have a formal document as opposed to a document that they have, but nothing extraordinary.
And so there wouldn't be any study costs or anything like that that we might anticipate?
I'm sorry, I just didn't hear what
studies. Are there any study costs that you anticipate?
So we don't anticipate it for our funding, I don't believe so. Now, some of the stuff that, and again, totally separate from us, but some of the things that Hale Resources will be pursuing, they've already begun to expend funds on, like market studies and all those sorts of things. Those do cost money. We don't expect that we're going to have anything significant like that. And I'm looking at Shannon because she's the one who has to fill these applications out, so she knows what has to go into them. And you're saying that you don't expect any significant funding, any significant expenditures of funds to apply for these grants.
Shannon's shaking her head no, emphatically. Yeah. Okay. All right. Any other questions, Sarah?
Okay, hang on, Jim. Go ahead, Jim.
Wait. Sorry.
Was that a no? I'm sorry.
That was a definitive no. Yes.
Okay. No, that's all.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, go ahead, Jim.
My question is for either Stu or Dan with respect to the completion of the Bennington project. There have been estimates as high as $9.6 million, in the middle range of $6 million. What would be the average yearly tax, property tax payments that would be generated?
So if I understand Jim's question, is he asking what the tax generated by the newly redeveloped Ben High would be? So the answer is I can't say definitively. I can tell you that right now I think the property is assessed for under $200,000, well under $200,000, and we expect the property to be assessed in the multi-millions of dollars, between $4 and $6 million, maybe more, probably not less. So Stuart's probably, well, not probably, he's way better at figuring out what that might generate annually in taxes. But that is one important point that I don't think we made strongly enough at the last meeting, is that we are taking a property which is assessed at virtually almost nothing for the size of it per square foot, and once we redevelop it, it'll be on the tax rolls at multi-millions
Can you
of dollars.
talk louder? They can't. I don't think they can hear you.
Yeah, it's really garbled.
Okay.
You got to talk really loud for them to hear you.
Okay. So I think Stuart's over there using his calculator.
Stuart is doing math, but the understanding is that we're going to take a property that is assessed at less than $200,000.
Well under.
And put it in the 4 to 6 million range. But Stu is doing math to get us closer.
Well, at 4 million, you're going to generate in excess of $60,000 in taxes.
$60,000, okay.
And that's town tax only.
$60,000 in property taxes.
Yes. I think you need to put him on the speaker.
Go ahead.
Upon completion of $4 to $6 million construction project, upon completion, we're only going to generate $4,000 to $6,000 in property taxes?
According to Stuart, $60,000 annually.
Say it again?
60,000.
Okay. Well, that's much more comforting. And, you know, just to underscore, you know, how important that is to the people of Bennington. You know, there have been complaints about sacrificing parking spaces in the town of Bennington for this project. And I would not want to sacrifice on the altar of parking space something that, you know, is going to generate between $4 and $6 million in the local economy for 12 or 14 parking spaces, and generating $60,000 a year into the future for this project. And that's all I have to say right now.
Anything else, Jim?
No.
He said it was it.
Okay.
Thank you, Jim.
Yeah, I just, the question that I've heard from a few people seem to have the two projects kind of meshed into one, and they really are separate projects. You have your funding sources, we have our funding sources. Are any of them going to cross over? Not that that's a bad thing, but will there possibly be some crossover? And people think that the town's funding sources are going to Hale Resources, which is absolutely not true.
So I think it's a bit more complicated than that, but it is I just want to make very clear that the residential portion will be funded by Hale Resources and their investors and funders, and the community space will be funded by the town and their resources, including the ARPA funds if they're committed. That being said, neither one of these projects can occur without the other. The residential space, in order for the residential project to go forward, the spaces that are not, you know, especially suited for residential need to be put into active use and actually be shown to be something that can generate income and be used. And the town, frankly, does not have the expertise to do residential development. It's just not something we can do. That's why we need a private partner to do that. It also leverages tax credits for the project. Now, as far as intermingling of funds, you know, we will have to figure out if there's a shared hallway. How do we pay for that? You know, we'll deal with that. For instance, these folks, if we partner with them and they proceed, we're going to be able to take advantage of tax credits that they are able to take, and then give to us in order to help fund our project, because we'll be investing money in the overall building. So there will be that type of thing, but there will be no direct subsidy, if that word, of their project, and no subsidy from them for our project. But they are very linked together, and that neither one can occur without the other. So if Hale Resources decided, you know, we're just not interested in doing this project, we don't have a path forward, at least not today, to complete this project. And I think Zach has spoken the same way with regard to our project and their project, that we need to do our project in order to facilitate the residential. But that doesn't mean that we're funding their project or that they're funding our project. I just want to make that very clear. That's not how this works.
I think we need to keep hammering that home because there's still confusion. And just a little bit ago, and I know you didn't mean to confuse people, you said funded by the town. When people hear that, you know where they're going. And the town is not funding this project. All the sources of revenue will be funding the project.
Very, very true. So it's funding that will flow through the town.
Exactly.
So, you know, there's the ARPA funds. We know we're going to use those. And there are various, we discussed them at the last meeting, there are various different grant funds that we would be looking for, possibly long-term no to low-interest loan funds, those sorts of things, which we'll all be looking at. And we will be bringing that funding stack, if you will, back to you folks to say, hey, here's what we've identified, here's what we've secured, here's what we're still working on. You know, what do you think? And that's going to be our updates as we proceed through, hopefully, the next 120 days.
Thanks.
Bruce?
Just a couple of things. You won't be surprised by either of them. Exploring ownership models to maximize funding. I think that's really critical and important. Excuse me. I'm wondering how reticent you are about at least giving us and the public some at least generalized direction of that ownership model, knowing that there will be a great deal more specificity at some future meeting, and I'm assuming that that will certainly be fleshed out in the partnership with Hale Resources.
Yeah, absolutely. It'll be fleshed out in a development agreement that we formally enter into with them. So I would be reticent to say this is exactly the model we're going to use, but I will give an example of a possibility. And I always feel nervous about this because someone said, well, you said it was going to be. No, what I'm saying is one way that it could occur.
Yes.
And it is one of the possibilities that we've discussed with Hale Resources. One possibility is that Hale Resources would buy the whole building from Chris Gilbert. They would own it, all 100,000 square feet. And then we would lease on a multi-generational level, 50, 75, 100 years, whatever makes sense based on the improvements that we make. We would lease our 30,000 square feet, perhaps with an option to purchase at the end for a nominal fee, et cetera. So basically, whatever we end up doing, Hale Resources will have control over their 70,000 square feet, and we will have control over our 30,000 square feet. Whether we own the whole building and lease it to Hale Resources, or Hale Resources own the whole building and lease it to us, or if we condominiumize it, there are so many options, none of which we know for sure is going to work with the funding streams that we're looking at. We do believe that one of the most likely outcomes is that Hale Resources will have to own the building because of the historic preservation tax credits. We can't take advantage of those as a municipality. And if they own the whole building, then we can take advantage of those for the whole building, not just the 70,000 square feet that they're developing. And I'm looking at Zach and John, because Zach's way smarter about this stuff than I am when it comes to tax credits. He's the guy. So if I misspeak, he can run up here and correct me.
I know how that is.
So, that's one example. Now, there's lots of different permutations that may take. But again, none of that will happen without your sign-off, the select board sign-off, and after it's been presented to the public. So although we'll be negotiating these things, trying to come up with something that works, we will not ultimately be making the decision to proceed or not. You folks will.
Right. Well, I appreciate that, and I appreciate your willingness to at least flesh out some options. The other question has to do with TIF funding, and TIF, which is really would require a bond vote. And yes, it would be true that essentially the bond is paid back by the increase in the value of the actual properties. The property values of that property pay the bond back. So the impact on the individual taxpayer should be negligible.
Right. And in fact, we won't be able to proceed with a bond vote until VEPC, the Vermont Economic Progress Council, who oversees TIF, confirms that the development agreement that we sign with Hale Resources actually reflects enough tax revenue to fully cover that bond. So it's not just me saying, oh, geez, we know the taxes are going to be enough to cover this bond. It's experts at the State of Vermont Economic Development Progress Council. Actually, it's not even them. They actually hire an economist to review it and confirm that it will be covered. So yes, there will not be an impact on the taxpayer for a TIF bond based on VEPC's review.
So, and that's, you began to address what was going to be my question, which is why are we waiting until later? And if I understand your answer to my previous, at least, query, it is basically until we have the partnership agreement and the ownership agreement established and settled, and the plans are fully vetted so that we know what kind of a project we're ending up with. We can't even supply an application for a TIF bond to VEPC, and they can't then do their work that they have to do in order to approve that particular bond vote. So that's why it is not possible to even remotely think that one through now. Is that correct?
You're absolutely correct. It's a very accurate review of what needs to happen. That being said, as soon as we have our development agreement with Hale Resources, we will apply to VEPC to get approved to proceed with the bond vote, and then it'll be up to the select board to decide when and if they want to have the bond vote for the TIF bond. So it doesn't have to be a terribly long time from now, but it just can't be, we can't be asking now because we're not even permitted to ask for a TIF
you're
bond.
Not even, right now you're not even under, at this very moment, you are not even allowed to even, to get to the documents you need in order to apply
That's
to
correct.
VEPC.
Yep.
Because we haven't authorized that yet.
Right. Number one step will be development agreement. Number two will be applying to VEPC. Number three will be authorizing the bond vote. And lots of little steps in between, but those are the big ones. So that we feel, because of the way VEPC is set up and because they're so rigidly regulated, TIF bonds are virtually assured of paying for themselves over the period of the bond. That's just how they work. Because one of the things we'll do is when we negotiate with Zach and John, we're going to say, hey, this is going to be the assessed value, and you can't grieve it. And you have to agree not to grieve that assessed value. No, it can be no lower than X. And so we know what that value will be over the period of the bond, and we know that it will generate X amount of dollars, and we know that'll be enough to cover the bond costs. So that's how that works, and that's why there's virtually no risk to the taxpayer once a project is bonded and completed. So, and even that point, let's say we vote for the bond, but the project falls apart, we won't take the bond out. So, I mean, we only take the bond out when and if we're assured that the taxes will be generated to cover it.
Right.
So.
Thank you, Ed. That's it.
Thank you, Bruce.
Jean, you had another question?
Yeah, I have one more question. I think it's probably mostly for Shannon. In the grant funding world, if we are awarded a grant, one of the more substantial ones, does that tend to motivate other funders to want to be part of the project? It does. That's really good news. Okay.
Yes, that's a good question. And in fact, we're very fortunate in Vermont that a lot of the different state agencies that have these larger grants, like for example, the Community Development Program, the Vermont Community Development Program, they will actually organize what they call a funders meeting for these kinds of really large-scale projects, where they will pull together Vermont Housing and Conservation Board, Vermont Community Development Program, Vermont Community Foundation, et cetera, and give us a chance to really talk about the whole vision in a similar way that we did in our public meeting. And that really helps propel the project, right? And the state wants to see, oh, you've already got this lined up, okay, we're on board. I mean, sort of in a similar way that we're saying now, this first ARPA funding really gets that ball rolling. So yes.
Is that a meeting that we should be at?
I mean, I think we should organize that meeting, and certainly we can invite Select Board to be a part of. I think that would be...
Okay, to be determined down the road.
Yeah, I mean, it might make more sense to, just have, rather than a formal public meeting, have a couple of Select Board members as a part of that, almost like we've done with similar but smaller scale projects where we have like a committee, for example, for some of the different projects that we've been working on. But I think that would be a great thing to also show that support and buy-in from the town to some of these different state agencies.
Thank you, Shannon.
Great. Any additional questions? You're all set.
Just to follow up on that funding question, and I think Shannon said it, but I just want to emphasize it, is every single funder wants to say, well, our $1 million leveraged $20 million. So the more funding that's in, the more that they can say, well, our little bit of money created this huge project, or made this huge project possible. So everybody wants to be in it together so that they can talk about the amount of money that they've leveraged. And that's why this $2 million is likely to leverage up to $20 million if we can find the funding sources to pull it off.
All right, any last questions from the Select Board or comments before we move to public? Not hearing any. Any questions? Yes, Jackie.
I've listened to all of the past meetings, and especially Wednesday's meetings, and tonight I'd like to read an allegory. This is allegedly the transcript of an actual radio conversation of the U.S. naval ship with Canadian authorities off the coast of Newfoundland. Canadians, please divert your course 15 degrees south to avoid a collision. Americans, recommend you divert your course 15 degrees north to avoid a collision. Canadians, negative. You will have to divert your course 15 degrees to the south to avoid a collision. Americans, this is the captain of a U.S. Navy ship. I say again, divert your course. Canadians, no. I say again, you divert your course. Americans, this is the aircraft carrier USS Lincoln, the second largest ship in the United States Atlantic Fleet. We are accompanied by 3 destroyers, 3 cruisers, and numerous support vessels. I demand that you change your course 15 degrees north. I say again, that's 15 degrees north, or countermeasures will be undertaken to ensure the safety of this ship. Canadians, this is a lighthouse. Your call. So tonight, I guess I'm reading this to mention that the seniors in particularly look at their place where they go every day, or sometimes 3 times a week, as their clubhouse. In no way do they feel that the upcoming changes would be as warm and welcoming as what they have now. My other point is the people in this town have a lot of expertise and experience. And none of the people that I've talked to think that this project has feet. They look at it as a house of cards, particularly since 2 other projects had phase 1 and phase 2, and the one on Putnam is looking for a TIF as well. And so they look at this as phase 1 and phase 2, oh no. And so if you talk to more people or let this lie a little bit longer and get maybe groups together and talk to them, maybe they can express what they feel. Most people that I've talked to would like this money that you have, almost $2 million, to be spent on homeless shelters and homeless warming shelters and homeless places for people to go to. I mean, we're looking at winter now, and I don't hear anything happening still. We have opportunities in this area to use that money, that $2 million, and maybe rent a couple of vacant storefronts. Particularly, I'm looking at the one on Cumberland, Northside Drive, the one that is now vacant as a warming shelter, not a place where you put beds and things, but since it's so close to available food, we could be there and pass out cards to go to Cumberland's, go to McDonald's, go to someplace. But this is our winter coming, and I don't know what you do for the people who are under the bridge. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to ask Shannon to respond a little bit to the Senior Center, but I do want to reiterate, Jackie, that starting in the fall of 2021, we asked town staff to meet with a large number of groups in town as well as departments within the town and pull together an initial list of things we might want to do with the $3.9 million in ARPA funds. Then Jonah coordinated a magnificent month of community input, which included everything, including all of us getting a small pony. There were all kinds of great suggestions. So, and I will say that We reached out to everyone that was interested in engaging in town. I don't remember the number of responses, but it was a large number of responses that we received, both in writing and also verbally. I will also say that 3 years ago, the town began going monthly to the Continuum of Care meetings. I've been going for 3 years. Jonah also attends now. And that is a group of people involved in housing in all aspects, and focuses very, very significantly on unhoused individuals. If there was an easy solution, if there was a group who could step up and do more, they would. And it is something that we all are very worried about, but it does not solve the problem to say, why don't we turn Cumberland Farms into a warming shelter? Someone has to run it. It cannot be the town. We do not have that expertise. It needs to be someone that has the expertise to do that. The town is at all these tables. We are willing and trying to help, but we cannot do it alone. So I appreciate your comments, but I do want to say that, as it gets cold every year, we get a little more worried about what the heck we're going to do through another cold winter. But if we knew how to solve this, I assure you we would. But speaking to the seniors, Shannon and Jonah have been heavily involved in this.
Sure. And I can't speak for the seniors at the Senior Center, but we have from the very beginning been working with our partners who would be, the anchor users of those community spaces, the Town Senior Center, Meals on Wheels, and the YMCA that runs our recreation programs. And we started with convening a couple meetings at the Senior Center with the architect, Jeff Goldstone, to really go through the initial conceptual plans for the space, get their feedback, make changes. He has already made changes based on the seniors' input, which were really important. And, I think change is really hard, and I think that you're right. I mean, the space they have now is really warm and cozy, and so that's our challenge, is how do we recreate, it won't be the same space, but how do we make a really inviting and welcoming space? And also, what are the opportunities that we don't currently have in our senior center that we will have in this new space? And one of those is having this co-location of everything on the same level, having Meals on Wheels really right across the hall with a dining space that's twice as big, with a stage, with entertainment, and the arts as part of the programming, and having the Y across the other hallway running exercise classes and other events, because we don't have that now. And using Ben High over the last 2 years, really, with some state grant money, we were able to do some programming there with the YMCA, and it was kind of proof of concept that the community wants to use that space, even in the condition that it's in now. And there were, I want to say, 8 to 10 regular classes there during the day that were senior focused. And the Y is continuing those classes and kind of finding different spaces for them. But our goal is really to have all of those in one place. And those groups are working together now to do more integrated programming. And I think that's an improvement for seniors in the community.
Sam.
Sam Racine of Bennington, Vermont. Ironically, when you're talking about the senior center, the Y, and can't think of it, Meals on Wheels, there's an open house Wednesday from 10 to 2. How do you convey that information to the general public? I spoke about this Wednesday, where I don't know where people get their information. If they don't watch public access from CAT TV, read the banner, pick up the phone and call and make inquiries, where do people get their information? They become hermits. They become afraid. They just accept what's there. Why fight it? They're going to do what they want to do. But there is an open house this come Wednesday from 10 to 2. You can go to the senior center, the Y and Meals on Wheels. This brings up the question of, should I go with an electric car or still keep my gas engine?
We're on Ben High. Like, can you?
I'm getting to that way, okay?
Okay, I'm glad
okay?
you are.
If other people can go off directives, so can I. Okay? There's still questions from Wednesday that haven't been answered. There's still asbestos in the buildings. There's still people that have to be signed on board. I'm glad that Bruce did an article in the Banner in Saturday's paper, a commentary. One person from the select board. I don't know how the rest of you feel on the select board.
Sam, please stay on topic. Okay.
I am. How you feel on this, whether we should go proceed or not proceed? I heard a comment from Stu Hurd on what has to be done. I heard a comment from Bruce Lee. The rest of you I haven't heard on whether you're for or against. We've elected you officials to represent us, which is the best in Bennington, to quote unquote Bruce, what he said in the paper, of what is best for Bennington. Well, I stand up here and come to meetings and I challenge you folks to, I feel, what is best for the taxpayers.
Okay, so Sam, so it sounds like you didn't have any additional questions. That was really a comment. Is that accurate? Sam? Did you have questions?
I've got a lot of questions, and I'd like to get them to answer. But are you voting for it tonight, today?
Yeah, well,
I mean, as far as what?
To
proceed,
yes.
Which I made a hypothesis that you guys are going to sit there whether we should go with this or not. And naturally, to go for phase 2, which is the TIF. We didn't even talk about the TIF come Wednesday. Now we're bringing up TIF, which is total induced fear, in my opinion, is how I label a TIF. It's 20 years of paying tax-funded credits, not only for Bennington, Ben High, but for any other thing that has to go on in the TIF district. We are in a TIF district, right? We've been accepted as a TIF district, right, since 2017 when we had that meeting. Back in August.
Yes, but what we're discussing
5 years ago, we spoke about this in this TIF meeting. 101. I've done my research. We've gone back. We've talked about this for 5 years. And now we're making a decision whether we should proceed or not. $9 million is a lot, and it's not going to be at 9. It could be double that.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. Any other questions from the audience? Yes, Deb.
Debbie Matt from Bennington. The Y set up a create and play group for the grandparents and their grandchildren.
Deb, can I ask you to speak? Debbie, could you speak directly into the microphone? Thank you. Yes.
The Y set up a create and play group for the grandparents at the senior center on Mondays from 10 to 11. Why they have it there, who authorized it, I don't know. But I know that one week there was nobody there from the Y to entertain the kids and have snacks with them. Another week, the grandparent let the kid run from one place of the center to the other. And when the Y wasn't there, the grandmother went to the receptionist at the senior center complaining because nobody was there, and it was not the senior center that set this up. It was the Y, and they were instructed that they needed to speak to somebody at the Y, not the senior center. We do not want young children around, no offense, but I believe it's proven that you pick up the virus and the flu and the cold and all that good stuff from all them little chillins because they love to share stuff. And if you're going to have them mixed over in our area in the new building, we're going to have a lot more sick seniors. And I do feel that we've done pretty good this COVID season with not a whole lot of seniors getting severely ill. Parking, as y'all know, parking's been one of my big beefs in Bennington. And I do not believe for a minute that there's anywhere near enough parking over at the new place. And Dan, I believe, made the remark that they can convert that little patch of grass over by the cemetery into parking. You're going to ask seniors to walk across 2 highways to get to the new place because they're going to get stuck parking over there. Who knows where else they would get stuck parking, and when it's nasty weather, somebody's going to slip and fall on the ice or in the snow or whatever, and we'll end up with a broken hip or something. And per the meeting Wednesday, the Goldstein architect said that he'd been working on and off with numerous people with this building for over 20 years and nothing has come of it. To me, that doesn't sound like a very good sign that we should be moving into this building. And I don't have the history of the current senior building, but I keep hearing from others that do that the town promised to take care of the senior centers, and taking this away from us without a vote isn't really taking care of us. And I was told that somebody purchased that building and gave it for the seniors, and if that's true, how can the town just sell it or give it or exchange, whatever you want to call it? Thank you.
Thank you. Dan, do you want to address some of this? Some of these questions? Okay.
I'll try. I think the first thing was about not wanting children around. I won't comment on that. Parking, we committed at the last meeting to do analysis of parking to make sure that there's sufficient parking for folks. And one of the things we did talk about is reserving parking for seniors on the site, not remotely. I will remind folks that the senior center now is adjacent to a large housing project with very limited parking. We expect there to actually be, though we haven't done the numbers yet, Jonah was actually asked if he could do it, and I said, yeah, take a look. And I think that we'll find that the numbers are pretty similar and maybe even better at the Ben High project than the current situation. But that being said, we do intend to look very closely at parking to make sure that it's adequate for the needs of the facility. Selling of the senior center, we've had our attorney look into that. We have no concerns about that. We wouldn't have proposed it if we felt uncomfortable about selling the senior center. So that has been looked into as far as. I said selling the senior center, we've had our attorney look into to see if there are any impediments to that, and our attorney has said there are none. The other question is, I think it's a why now question. Why does it make sense now to proceed with the Ben High project? And there are lots of reasons we talked about extensively. In fact, Zach did a really great job at the last meeting to talk about why now. And it really has to do with availability of funding. Also, the fact that the current owner has done some significant stabilization of the building. So we have funding opportunities, we have a stabilized building, and we have a partner that's ready, willing, and able to work with us to bring back this important structure. We have not solved the puzzle yet. We're working on it, and that's why we're going to be coming back to you folks. You've charged us to try to make this project work, and we are fully committed to doing that. Town staff and Hale Resources, we're going to work very, very hard to bring back a project that can be funded and will be good for the entire community. So until you tell us to stop, that's what we're going to do.
Thank you. Yes, please. Oh, okay.
I did follow up on the Bloomsack Apartments, which is the housing unit adjacent to the existing senior center. It's a 50-unit housing development, and there are 20 parking spots for that housing development. There are 12 spots that are specifically for the senior center and Meals on Wheels currently. The site plan identifies 67 parking spots at the new proposed Ben High redevelopment location.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Good evening. Clark Adams, Bennington. One thing I'd like clarified, I keep hearing the number $9 million for this project. And I realize that there's been discussions that there's a multifaceted entities that are going to be involved. As we understand now, that it's $2 million of the ARPA funds, which essentially is the monies that the city is putting forward, and that balance of $7 million is coming from outside entities that are, it's not a financial obligation or liability for the town of Bennington.
Dan, you want to address that?
Any other questions about that?
Well, I just want to make that clear because I keep hearing $9 million being thrown around, and I'm trying to sort out where that number comes from, and if that's a real number, who's responsible for each slice of the pie. And, you know, I think people in town might feel a little better hearing unequivocally, yes, $9 million, but we, the taxpayer, former town of Bennington, are responsible for what, and where's it coming from?
So I'll try to answer that question, maybe say it a little differently than we've said it in the past, just to clarify. So yes, we have an estimate for $9 million. We also have an estimate for $4 million and an estimate for $6 million, and we're going to be working really hard to keep that as low as possible. So it's a probable cost of anywhere from $4 to $9 million, so that is accurate. And you can go online and look at the website, and it has the estimate on the website, and it's pretty detailed. So that's the estimate for the community space that we're working off of currently. As far as funding and taxpayer liability, our charge has been to find capital costs to construct this project without the use of taxpayer funding. That's our charge. So that's going to be what we attempt to do. We have been completely transparent about the fact that there is likely to be a TIF bond, but we've also been very clear that that TIF bond will be paid for taxes generated by this property and not by other taxpayers. So that is where we are right now, and we will be coming back to the select board in the next 90 to 120 days to talk about how successful we've been in finding those funding sources and reducing costs. So that's where we are right now, but there's been no discussion about floating a general bond to fund the community space or the residential space for that matter, which we've clearly said over and over that's going to be a Hale Resources effort. Obviously, we're going to work together to find funding for the whole thing, but Hale Resources is responsible for that portion of the project, the residential portion.
Correct me if I misunderstood what you said. So in fact, the possibility of the piece of this development that's under the control or responsibility of the town of Bennington ranges from 4 to 9 million, exclusive these gentlemen's involvement. Okay. So that just, wow. Okay.
So just to be clear, based on what, and Zach, you can correct me if I'm wrong, we're looking at that level of investment, if not more, in the residential portion. So we're talking about a very large project that will bring a significant asset online for the community, and that's what we're charged to do, to try to find a way to make that happen.
Yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to, it's sort of unfortunate that your number is 9 million and the town's number is 9 million, but it's not the same 9 million. It's just kind of unfortunate that those two numbers are the same.
So, John Hale from Hale Resources. So I'd just like to clarify a few things, because I've had this question asked of me around town as well, is why now one of them? I mean, I've been kicking this can down the road for 13 years, and today there is more funding available through the Inflation Reduction Act for environmental green to put maybe a geothermal system into this building. That wasn't there 13 years ago. There is funds from the American Rescue Act. Those funds were not available 13 years ago. So there's an opportunity here right now to create housing in this community, to create a community center, to team up as a municipality and a private investor to show that, hey, there's a team effort here, that we're really trying to improve something. If you look at the Putnam, that was $30 million. It's not worth $30 million. That's the problem in Vermont. You buy these buildings, We did the 219 project on Pleasant Street. Good example for our experience. We spent $1.6 million. It's worth $670,000. So these buildings are old. They've been neglected. There's a lot of deferred maintenance. It takes a lot to get these things back in operation. And all this funding is not a check written to us. It is reimbursed to us as we spend money. So we actually have to come up with funding that bridges us through the construction. And then when we prove, and some of the grants are through the town, they do a single audit. They have to prove that we spent this money with invoices and blank canceled checks to understand that we've actually spent this money on the project. It's not going in our pockets. So, I mean, there's a lot of complexity to these things, and we can't do this project without each other. There's 30,000 square feet that we can't use for housing. There's 70,000 square feet that the town can't use. They're not a housing developer. So really, this is a win-win that we might not ever have again. So, I mean, it's an opportunity for us to really group ourselves together as a community and take this building and put it back into its glory day like we did at 219 Pleasant Street, we did with the Putnam. Not us, but, you know, as a community that was done. So just wanted to clarify some things that I've heard that really it's more complicated than most people could imagine. And it's not just us coming in and saying, oh, we're going to go build some housing. It takes a lot of team effort here. So.
And if I could just add one more thing, the money that we're going after, it's not as if we're taking out a loan for this or anything. Well, we will in some cases, but most of the money that we're raising, the grant money, the money is going to be spent no matter what. And so it's a matter of, is it going to be spent in Bennington or is it going to be spent in Chittenden County? I mean, that's really what we're up against. And so what we're trying to do is bring some of that money to Bennington and have it redevelop something that could be a very valuable asset to the community.
Thank you. I appreciate all of that. And I do think the other good pieces of it, there are many good pieces of it, but another good piece of it is that then you have local construction, you have buying materials. I mean, you have all the things that go along with economic development. And, you know, it's interesting, I guess, because we had both the housing and the community folks here, we've spent less time talking about the collaborative and just sort of the amazing transformative property of having co-location of community assets and housing. That for a senior, you could live in the same building where you also get your meals, where you have your exercise, where you hang out with your friends. Having that co-location for all ages and stages is really amazing. And from outside of Bennington, everyone that hears about the Ben High project is just like, this is such an amazing idea. You know, this is something worth putting our time, effort, and money into. And the fact that the money is coming to us, if we don't take it, somebody else will, that is not to be underestimated or sneezed at. So, you know, I thank you for all the work you've done thus far. So, having interjected that, other comments? Mary.
Mary Morrissey, Bennington. I appreciated that you said, Mr. Hale, that this could be a win-win situation for the town. So why are we still not formally partnered with the town? I know you're waiting for the funding, but if this is such a win-win and we're seeing it right out of the gate, why aren't we?
I think that's one of the...
Probably go one by one. I wasn't able to be here last week.
Okay, so, oops. Mary, did you have other questions? I was going to say, I mean, part of what we're doing tonight is hopefully voting on this so we can move forward.
Can she say? No, I don't
of course.
mean to. No, that's fine. And I apologize, I was not able to be here last week, so I have a couple of questions. Under the phase one, you're listing all the different grants and sources of funds. Could you explain even like the 9% of all development costs reimbursed by the sale of state-designated downtown tax credits up to $600,000 per year per municipality, eligible if partner with Hale Resources? So how was that identified, and is it looking? I hear from my constituents all the time, and that's who I'm here talking for. They're not understanding. Before, it sounded as though Shires was locked into this project, and then back a couple of months ago, or whatever the time frame was, they were out of it. And then we were told, or at least the paper indicated, that Hale was on board for this. And then we're told we don't really have a partnership formalized, so people are really having a struggle in getting their arms around this project. I think a lot of our citizens look at what has happened at the Putnam Block. Now, the initiative originally was a well-intended, good initiative, but what was promised through those stages have not happened. We've brought maybe 2 new businesses. We've rearranged, we brought another business for somewhere else. Technically, the same thing is going to happen at the middle school. We're not creating anything new. It's a different structure, and I appreciate that. But I think our citizens are concerned with what they're looking at presently, with the town having been involved somewhat with the Putnam Block, because we have not seen the next phases going. And people will say, well, we're already jumping to another project. We haven't finished that. We don't have half of the storefronts filled. It's almost like we keep hearing these big projects, but they don't happen. And that's just my commentary, telling you from what I'm hearing from lots of constituents. And they're very concerned that this is being jumped into with not some of the connections, which I think we all thought the connection would be with Mr. Hale and your company, that other things would be a little bit more in line, because I think what you laid out here raises more questions than answers anything. So, and again, most people are very concerned with the fact that, and I know you have to go through the process with the state as far as getting the application in for the TIF, but I find the TIF portion of this is just as important as phase 1, because it's 2 million or up to 2 million. And by the way, what exactly, because I've heard different possible TIF financing, how you're going to use the TIF, and maybe that one you can answer for us directly.
Lots of stuff. So maybe I'll start with the easy one. We do have a formal relationship with John Hale and Zach Hale. We have a memorandum of understanding. What we mean by formalize the partnership, we need to have a very detailed development agreement so we can proceed with all the funding and also deal with the VEPC application on the TIF. So we have a signed document between the 2 organizations to proceed, and in fact, Hale Resources has expended exceptional amount of money, energy, and effort to work with us to proceed with this project. So as far as questioning their commitment, it is rock solid, and they are spending their money, not the town's money, to determine the feasibility of this project for the residential portion. So, and I'm sure I'll let John and Zach speak to that if they'd wish, with regarding to the level of effort they've already expended. So they're fully committed, and we're fully committed to proceed with this project if we get a formal approval tonight. As far as why Shires is no longer a partner, I think we all know they had staffing issues. They were unable to proceed. It had nothing to do with this project. I'm sure, Mary, you know what happened there, and it's a very unfortunate situation, but it had nothing to do with the town, and it had nothing to do with this project. Unfortunately, they had to move on to a different leadership. As far as the question regarding TIF and how that will be expended, we've been very clear that that will be expended on phase 2, which includes the gymnasium, the changing rooms, the locker rooms, and the exercise rooms, and all the infrastructure that goes along with that. So that's not anything new. That's how we've talked about it the whole time. There was a lot of talk about the Putnam block. I don't agree with your characterization that that Putnam block was not successful. It resulted in lots of housing at different levels, everything from market rate to affordable housing. Bennington College is there. We have a new coffee shop there. The nurses are there. There's a new salon there. There's even a pet shop there. It's a very successful project. There are still some spaces that are not rented, although there's only 2, I believe, and the restaurant is proceeding. So very, very successful project in my mind, and basically took a area of town that was just simply falling in and turned it into what I would consider a gleaming block in our downtown. So, but I will reiterate that the Putnam block is not a town project. The only funding we have in that is a loan for $300,000 that will be repaid by the developer. So not a town project. We have no control over that project except to ensure that we get repaid for the relatively minor investment in that project. So I think that answers the Putnam project. As far as the tax credits are concerned, I'm going to let Shannon and Zach talk about those, because tax credits are something that Zach is very, very knowledgeable about, and can talk about those way more knowledge than I can. And I think that's all the questions but the tax credit, but if there's something I missed, let me know.
So when it comes to certain types of tax credits, what they do is they reimburse you based on what you've spent on a project for certain categories of expenses. So, for example, and I know 219 well, we received state designated tax credits for specific items like the sprinkler system, let's say, and we could get up to $50,000 for reimbursement on the sprinkler system. We spend $100,000. It reimburses you actually 10%, so we could get $10,000 back, up to $50,000, but we didn't spend enough to get the full $50,000. And then we sell those for 90 cents on the dollar, and then we get $9,000 back because we spent $10,000. So it's like there's a whole calculation, but we don't get reimbursed dollar for dollar because we have to sell those tax credits because we're not going to use them. So does that make sense with tax credits? Okay. And I would just like to also mention something about the Putnam block. I mean, I saw a couple head nods. Yeah, do you need a better explanation for the tax credits?
You hit on some of it, but it's not, I think, clear.
Basically, we're just going to spend money, and whatever we spend money on, we'll get reimbursed a small percentage, 10% of what we spend for the things that qualify, and then we're going to take those tax credits and sell them to somebody who will use them, and they'll pay us 90 cents for every dollar in tax credit that we got. Does that make sense?
And are the tax credits different for each different tax credit? There's like a downtown tax credit, I believe, and then there's some other. Do they all work the same way?
Zach, please repeat the question because Cat TV doesn't pick
So she's
up
just asking about the different types of tax credits, and are they all the same? And they are not all the same. We're looking at low-income housing tax credits, we're looking at historic preservation tax credits, and then the state-designated downtown tax credits. And they all are unique in their own way. Historic preservation has different categories that they will cover. They actually go up to 20% of reimbursement, and then we would, again, sell those for 90 cents on the dollar. Oh, well, that might even change because that's a fluctuating price and value that you can get. So then we would sell those, let's say if it's 90 cents, we get 18% reimbursement for what we spend on those categories. Low-income housing tax credits, I believe those are also 30% with the 4% credits that we're using. So again, that whole calculation of 90% on the dollar, if that's what we sell them for.
And so the useful thing about what you're saying is that you guys have to figure out how to use the tax credits as part of your funding stream, right? So I don't really need to know how, because you guys are going to figure out.
And the other thing is that, I mean, that is part of the plan, and we're going to have to spend, if we spend, we're going to have to spend all the money we plan to leverage those tax credits for, and then be reimbursed at the end for those tax credits. And so we're going to take on a lot of debt in order to do that, and take a lot of risk in order to do that. So there's a lot more than just, hey, we're going to get this money. Like John said, these are all reimbursements, and the tax credits are going to be a big part of this project, and we're going to take on that liability of making sure, like with historic preservation, you have to do, there's like, it identifies what the building looks like now, and then what our plan is with the building, that gets signed off on, and then there's a part 3 that says, okay, you did what you said you were going to do. And if we don't do what we say we were going to do, then we don't get those tax credits, and now we have that massive debt that we have to pay back. And we're on the, that John and I are going to have personal guarantees on. And so those are the things that we're setting ourselves up for, and I don't know if that's not showing commitment, then I'm not sure what would. But it is all good on that. Okay. And then one other thing I did want to just mention with the Putnam Block is that as someone who's trying to bring people here that are interested in investing in our community, I think that the Putnam Block has just kind of changed the entire scope of doing that thing. I've seen a lot of people, investors that I've brought here that see stuff like that and are like, wow, this is completely different. I see kids I went to high school with that walk downtown, and then they tell me like the downtown is completely different than what it was, because there are some spaces that are vacant there, but you know, I think it's a lot of the storefronts have filled up because of it, and you know, the Putnam blocks are a little bit higher in rent, so the cheaper ones are filling up first, right? I mean, it kind of just makes sense. So this town has really changed since I moved back in 2018, and I think the Putnam block was a huge part. I know the Putnam block was a huge part of that, and so I'm looking forward to phase 2 as well, because I don't think that's out of the question at this time. So that's all I have.
Thank you.
So the question was about the $9 million, which was somewhat explained to by Dan. But you then indicated it would be assessed for 4 to 6 million or 6.
That's our best estimate. We don't know for sure.
So if the project is going to be built for $9 million, then it's assessed for lower?
I think that, I mean, John, I think you answered that question earlier. Maybe you want to reiterate.
How are you? So, as I explained before, these projects in these old buildings, they're substantially higher than the cost, what the building would be appraised at. And really, we're going to spend close to $20 million in this building, and it's only going to be worth $4 to $6 million. This is the same incident that happened with the Putnam. They spent $30 million, and I think it was assessed at about $8 million. Yeah, so the thing with these old buildings, I mean, you have to bring them up to the current codes, energy efficiency, and that cost is exuberantly more than what the building will be worth when it's completed. That's what makes these difficult to do in the state of Vermont. I think this is something that happens across rural America. So yes, it will only be appraised between $4 and $6 million, with a $20 million investment overall between the housing and the community center.
And again, that is part of why the ARPA funds are so important, because not for the ARPA funds, we really wouldn't have that seed money to sort of bring in all this additional money.
But again, that concerns me that these properties, and I understand what you're saying about the historic. I remember the Shire's project between Silver and South Street. When it was built, $9 million. When they cut the ribbon, I believe it went down to 1.9. That's not good for our community, folks, but I have just a couple more questions.
40 more units of housing is good for our community, and certainly the Silver Street, the project Mountain View, is that, I'm blanking on the name. Monument View.
I understand that, but we
Excellent.
as taxpayers across the community, the state, and paying federally, we all pay into it. So at this point, there seems to be other questions out there about Mr. Gilbert. Where does he play into this? Who we now are, he technically, I guess, is the owner. I mean, I've heard many different, so he's the owner. What does he play, what is his role in going forward? And the monies that the town, I believe, are we paying, is it $5,000 a month or something for the building? Could someone explain all of that? Because people are not understanding that either, where Mr. Gilbert at the end of the day will he be still part owner? Not? I've heard folks say that Mr. Hale will own the whole project at the end of it, so
I think
if someone
Dan or
could
Shannon.
Explain that, that would be very good.
Yeah, Dan or Shannon, you want to talk about Chris Gilbert's role?
Chris Gilbert is the current owner of the property, and as we've explained multiple times in the past, we negotiated a lease with Mr. Gilbert to gain site control of the property. It is a long-term lease, up to 30 years, with a option, essentially is a lease-to-own lease, where we are paying a payment similar to a mortgage payment every month at a exceedingly low effective interest rate. It's a 1% above prime, way back when prime was super low. So it's a very low interest rate. We did that primarily to obtain site control. We do expect that will be converted either to a mortgage or the property will be purchased outright. The lease does include an option to terminate if we decide not to proceed. So it's a very flexible instrument for maintaining site control of the property while we try to find a way to move forward.
It appears I did not effectively communicate this message. We all pay into taxes, and it costs this much money to do this anywhere. And if we want to bring those federal tax dollars back to our community, then we need to do projects like this. Otherwise, they're going to go somewhere else, and they're going to spend $20 million somewhere else to do a project like this, and it'll only be worth $4 million at the end. So.
And I do appreciate all of those components that do mix together. I truly do. I think a couple quick more. You are talking about a funding gap, and it will be covered by private investment. Have you anticipated a number for that at this point in your preliminary discussions with how much that will raise?
Larry, do you have any other questions for us this evening, or do we still have some? Okay, you want to ask, and then we can answer your questions
all. Okay, under the project documents, and I would like to have an understanding about the asbestos abatement, and here you have the time and materials and the costs, and yet it was stated there was a list of initiatives that Mr. Gilbert had done prior to this. such as sheetrock, such as roofing with insulation, such as other pieces. How do you do a project and start it? And again, I'm sure it depends upon where the asbestos is. But I went to school there, and I can probably tell you there was a lot of asbestos there. So how are those pieces done to correct when asbestos abatement, and that has to virtually be done with a hazmat team to do that type of work, and I'm not sure if any of that's been done. And I guess I would also like to know all the windows that have been out on the building at different stages. It started on what would be the eastern side for months, whether it was spring, winter, or whatever, with weather just coming into that building. I can only imagine the mold or anything else, and I'm sure they're looking to mitigate this, but I would hope going forward would look at all of this. I probably have 100 more questions, but those are just the start.
Thank you, Mary.
So to address the question about the private investment, I mean, that is we're looking to secure all of this funding, and that is just one piece to all of that. I've played around with some numbers, just kind of doing some projections, and I'm thinking that we could end up raising $1.5 to $2 million in private investment that people would have for the older section of the building. But at this time, it's not set in stone just because we aren't 100% sure of those funding sources, and we're hoping to fall back on that private investment to help fill some of the gap. But as we've said, $20 million, $4 million worth, it's worth $4 million after. You know, there's not too much of a return on that investment, and so that's why we need the grants to work in with all of this to incentivize those investors to invest into Bennington. So.
So the last two questions that Mary asked are important environmental questions, and we have done environmental due diligence for asbestos and mold, and we will continue to look at the mold issue. Mold is relatively easy to remediate. You just have to get the moisture out, get the materials out that have the mold on it, and since this is essentially a full gut job, all those materials will be removed if they do have mold. Although we haven't seen any significant mold in the building, it will be removed if there is any, and we will make sure that we do air testing to ensure there's no problems. As far as the asbestos, we had Catamount Environmental, they're a well-known firm in the state of Vermont, do an asbestos study and look at the community section of the building. They did find some asbestos. Most of it is under the gym floor, so it's not accessible. It's not being disturbed. It's actually can stay where it is, although we do plan to remove it. And so that is the majority of the asbestos discovered. There's some minor pipe coverings, just like in most old buildings, that we'll have to remove, et cetera. But we were actually pleasantly surprised that there wasn't any significant, asbestos issues that we didn't anticipate. It's all the typical stuff that you would see in a building like that, of that age, and none of it is anything that we feel is a showstopper. And we have prices that show how much it will cost for us to remove any asbestos or abate any asbestos in the building. I will say one benefit that we have enjoyed is that the vast majority of the asbestos was removed by Mac Lewis. That was actually going to be in the Hale Resources section. They removed a huge amount of asbestos from the boiler room. They could have just locked up that room and pretended it wasn't there. That's one way to deal with asbestos, is to close it off and make it inaccessible, but they actually removed the whole thing and it's been certified clean. And so that's been done, and if that was something that had to be done now, it would be very, very costly, but that's already done. So as far as the environmental concern, we've talked about the PCB testing, and the building is 100% clean as far as our air tests are concerned, and that was actually a very nice surprise. we expected at least some minor levels of PCBs, and to find zero was a very nice surprise for us, so.
Point of information. I think John has the floor.
Well, I wanted to talk a little bit more about the environmental condition of the building. I've known this building intimately since 2009, and we are in the process of having a Phase 1 environmental assessment completed. And actually, this building, considering its age, is in very good environmental condition. As Dan said, Mac Lewis, who was the previous owner, had all the asbestos removed from the boiler rooms, had the boilers removed two 10,000-gallon tanks that were buried in the ground. And the gentleman that was involved in all that work is doing the Phase 1. And actually, we've spoke quite a bit in the last couple of weeks. The Phase 1 needs to be done by November, and he's in very good shape to finish it, and he finds it to be a extremely good shape building, and he's not going to recommend that a Phase 2 be done because of the condition of the building. So it's kind of amazing that a 110-year-old building is in this kind of condition environmentally, because that's not usually the case. The Putnam block, between coal being dumped on the ground and the amount of asbestos in the basement and throughout the building, it was quite a project for them to get all that removed, which I was the manager of that building when that was happening, and this building is nothing like that at all. So.
Super. Okay. Sam, you have a quick question?
Yes.
Okay.
Is there any lead in the building with all those windows and everything and going through the age, with the windows that are being worked on? I know the fuel oil tanks have been removed, but with the abatement of asbestos, is there a document produced through the state of Vermont?
So any asbestos abatement is certified through the state. You have to have a permit. You have to be a licensed asbestos abatement company. So that would all be registered in the state. I don't know where that information is available, but you can certainly find it if you Google it. As for lead, anything built before 1978 is considered to have lead paint. So it needs to be treated appropriately. There's programs through the state, through the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board, that helps in that lead paint abatement. It does not have to be removed. It needs to be stabilized and then inspected on an annual basis through a program called Essential Maintenance Practices.
Thank you.
Just to be clear, at least with our estimates, all those estimates assumed that every surface was lead paint, so we know that that's built into the cost of renovating this structure.
Great. Any other questions? Nancy, come on over.
I dug out the list from December 21st of last year. Your priority projects for ARPA, Ben High was at the top of the list. Citizens were not allowed to participate in any of these meetings last year. We had no say. I asked at 2 meetings last fall, could we be involved? We weren't. 6 months ago, we were told the town of Bennington was going to buy the entire Ben High. Whoever was going to do the housing would pay us for 70%. Tonight I'm hearing that the Hales may own the entire building and the town may pay to lease back the 30%. Did I understand that right?
Nancy, ask your questions and then we can respond.
Somebody has to explain, am I correct that since April 1st, we have been using ARPA money to pay all of Mr. Gilbert's bills, in addition to paying him $5,300 to lease each month? When you say that this isn't costing the taxpayers, of course it is. As I understand it, Mr. Gilbert is going to be gifted our senior building, paid with our tax dollars for 45 years. He turns it into housing. 6 months ago, you wouldn't tell me who the housing is for. I also believe the senior building gets tied to the Ben High, and I hope somebody can clear this up one way or the other. The seniors are really getting the short end of the stick. They came before you 4 years ago when people wanted to put kids in there in the morning and the afternoon before school. Seniors were concerned for health reasons. The select board supported them. And to want to throw them into the Ben High because you need seniors there to get grants and funding, and you need the senior building to subsidize the Ben High project is ridiculous. To look at their space at the last meeting, they get a little bit more than what they've got now after 45 years. You can't dedicate any parking for them. Even people living there won't have a parking space. You know, I'll support a project when the project makes sense. This project makes no sense. We're paying nearly $1 million a year to nonprofits. We're supportive, we try to help, and the public is shut out. And I have a real issue. It isn't your fault, Shannon, it's the select board. I do not feel you have the right to go behind the backs of the people of Bennington offering all these groups and organizations deals, and the public was totally shut out. And I've tried to get answers for 1.5 years. I find out Meals on Wheels had gotten grant for equipment before you even had a meeting in March. And I don't know why you put these groups in a bad position where it's almost like they're working against the citizens. So I want you to explain about the senior building. And as I understand, under Vermont law, when you commit to the Ben High, Bennington voters have 30 days to sign the petition about the senior building. Now, if you have something in writing from the town lawyer that says opposite that, I need it. Because I do not want to see us use that building. It's exactly what it should be used for. It's next to the apartment building for seniors. Everything for the seniors works where they are. Everything at the Ben High works against them. And I'm not going to sell out the seniors so that we can have half of the space for the YMCA and everybody else.
Thank you, Nancy. I do want to just reiterate that we had a community meeting in March 2022 where we brought forth all of the many ideas for use of ARPA funds, and the select board deliberated and we set our top priorities, and Ben High was certainly among those top priorities.
Okay, I just want to I think there's some loose language regarding the YMCA. So I just want to make it very clear. The space will be operated by the YMCA, but the town will control the space. The YMCA is an entity that contracts with us to provide services to this community. The YMCA, it's not going to be owned by the YMCA. It will be owned or leased at a multi-generational lease to the town. So the town will control that space. We will continue, hopefully, because of the great job that they've done, hopefully the YMCA will continue to operate programs there, but it will be at a contract with the town in a town building. So I think just want to be really clear about this. Who we're building this space for is not for the YMCA. It's for the community and for the folks that would be taking advantage of the programs that would happen in that space. So I just think we just need to make that really clear. One of the things that Nancy has asked about is this 30-day petition period, and the state statute does say that whenever you are selling a town-owned property, you do have to give a notice and give 30 days for folks to petition. That was done, and in fact, I know, Nancy, I sent you the notice that we gave to the public and published in the banner, and explicitly stated that 30-day period. That has long since passed. We have met that requirement. And so there is no impediment to selling that building if the select board so chooses to move forward. You are not required to, not compelled to. We simply have the opportunity to if we decide to proceed. As far as the lease payment, it's a very typical lease. It's called the triple net lease, where you pay a lease payment and you pay for the taxes and insurance on the property. We insure the property, we pay the taxes on the property, but we're not paying Mr. Gilbert's bills. We are the owners and occupiers of the space, so there's nothing for us to pay that Mr. Gilbert is using. It's our space. I don't know how the lease is online. The terms are very clear, you can read them, and there's nothing. We've had it online for months, and now it's again posted on the Ben High project. So if anybody wants to read that lease, please do, and I'll be happy to answer any questions. You can send it to info@benningtonvt.org, and we can answer specific questions about that lease once you read that. Just to respond to the comment about the senior center building, the senior center space in the community center. It is a significantly larger space, but what's more important is it has access to all sorts of additional space. There's the community room space that the Meals on Wheels folks will primarily be using, but the seniors will have access to regularly. There's all the exercise spaces and gymnasium spaces that there will be senior programs in that the seniors will be able to use. We don't have that space at the current senior center. So, I think it's just ingenuous to say that they're not getting a better space there. Now, there may be folks who don't want to move to that space, but to say that it's not qualitatively better space is not an accurate statement. It is qualitatively better and quantitatively better. And we do hope that we're able to expand the programs there, and we expand the attraction of folks to use, so that we have more folks using that space instead of the very limited amount of folks that use it now. We're really grateful that folks use it now, but we really want to expand that and make it much more accessible to a broader range of the community. That's really the focus, because it is a taxpayer institution, and we should have more taxpayers using it, frankly. I think those are all the questions. As far as the ownership structure is concerned, we would expect, as far as our payment for the space that we occupy, that would remain similar whether it's a lease or we own it. There is as we've talked about, there's a $5,000 approximately payment per month to lease from Chris Gilbert the entire space. We'd expect to pay something less than that if another owner owned that space for our 30,000 square feet. So for the actual space itself. So there's no trickery here. There's nothing nefarious. We're just trying to make this deal work for the taxpayers. And we'll be back here regularly if you guys want us to proceed to update you on our progress.
All right, I think we're ready to call the question. Would someone like to make a motion? I'm sorry. Nancy, I'm sorry. You were asked to you are out of order. You were asked to ask all your questions.
Dan did not answer the question. Who is Mr. Gilbert going to turn our senior building into housing for? Why is that building going to be tied to the Ben High? How can you say you already have a deal for the Ben High?
Nancy, you asked your question. Please sit down.
Jeannie, he didn't answer the question.
Dan will answer your question. There is no answer, but
you have a totally different deal you're talking about now than you did 6 months ago.
Nancy, I'm gonna say this. You are out of order.
Just
Please sit down.
Get me the written from the lawyer that says we do not have the right under state law to get 30 days for the petition on the senior building. And we still need to find out, Dan, what he's going to do with that building.
So I think I answered the question about the 30 days. We did post a notice in accordance with our counsel's advice. So we're not saying you don't have the right, it's that we've already posted it and that 30-day period has expired. I don't know how much more clear I can be than that. The period has expired. As far as the Ben High building, we've had this lease in place since April. Is that right? April or May? So the deal has not changed since then. It's the same deal. As we discussed, it's a long-term lease, lease to own, with an option to terminate, and part of the deal includes, if we proceed, transfer of the senior center to Mr. Gilbert. That deal does not dictate to Mr. Gilbert how he uses that space. He's indicated it might be housing, but we do not have in that lease, nor do we intend to dictate to Mr. Gilbert how he uses that property. That's the deal. It was very openly discussed and voted on.
All right, I would love to have a motion on moving forward. Anyone like to make that motion? Yes, Gary.
I'd like to make the motion that we authorize the town to move with the next steps as outlined here to find out if this is financially feasible to move forward with this project.
Can I, Gary, can we be a little bit more specific than that? That is a wonderful general statement, but I think we, given the nature of this project, given what we're talking about, I feel uncomfortable with the sort of generalized nature of that. Would you be willing to say that we are instructing to commit $2 million in ARPA funding and to work toward formalizing, and then go right down through this list?
Yes.
If you would do that, then I would second it.
All right. So I'd like to make the motion that we proceed with the next steps to commit to the $2 million for the ARPA funding, to formalize the partnership with Hale Resources, to direct staff to identify savings and costs, to authorize staff to pursue funding, to explore ownership models to maximum funding, and to report back to the Select Board in 90 to 100 days with, I'd also like to add, interim reports back to us.
And I'm very comfortable with that as well.
I would second it.
Meaning that we don't proceed further than that without interim reports.
Okay, so we're in the discussion period. Did you hear Sarah's comment? So she also is in favor of having report backs, and it sounds like, I mean, if we could continue the process we're doing now every 45 days, that would be, that's every third meeting.
And sooner if something comes up, I mean.
Well, obviously, yeah, but.
But minimally,
yes.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay, any other discussion by the board?
Yeah, I think it's important to make sure people are aware here that committing this funding is not the same as spending this funding.
Exactly.
We can always uncommit it.
Well, it's committed only with the caveat that all of the other funding is in place before any money leaves the checkbook.
Yeah, and that's explicit in our recommendations.
Thank you for pointing that out, and I think that I just want to point out to the citizens that it doesn't move further without funding being in place.
Great. Okay. Any other discussion before we vote? All right. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Please say no. Any abstentions? All right. So it sounds like that was unanimous. Excellent. Thank you. Thank you for an incredibly thorough 2 days of discussion. I believe in all, it was 4 hours of discussion on this, which is quite a bit. So good. Thank you. All right. So we're ready to move on to the next agenda item, which is implementing the town vision. So Tom, I'm going to start with you.
All right. Last week, I had the pleasure of attending as the Select Board liaison to the CPAR Board, their final training meeting. Went over some real basic how do boards operate type of information with them. And would like to invite the public. Their first public meeting is this coming Thursday, 6 o'clock, right here. This meeting will be primarily organizational. They need to elect all of their officers and basically decide what they're going to do at their meetings. So I do encourage everyone to come this Thursday at 6.
Lovely. All right. Also, starting this week, the Bennington is included in the Ideal Vermont program through the Office of Racial Equity that Susanna Davis heads up. And Ideal Vermont stands for Inclusive Diversity, Equity, Action, and Leadership in Vermont. Dan Monks, Jonathan Phipps from the SVSU, and I are going to Randolph Center for an 8:30 a.m. meeting on Wednesday. Anyone that wants to let them know it's not a good idea is fine with us. And it looks like there are somewhere between 10 and 12 communities that are taking part in this, and it is really a program to take people into action. It includes some funding to help action take place. So we're looking forward to this first meeting and actually seeing who is there besides just seeing emails, trying to figure out, what towns are involved. So that's all. Anything else on implementing the town vision? Nope. Okay. So then on to the manager's report.
Thank you. I didn't have any action items. I mean, Dan did the manager's report. It is startling how well written it is. Oh, is that it? Well, thank you for that. But I do have one action item now tonight. Cat TV is asking permission to place an 18 by 24 sign on the town office's front lawn, which will, through the month of November, honor veterans on, I'm not sure whether it's a weekly or a daily basis. So the names will change on the signage. This is because it's a sign being placed by Cat TV. It will say that Cat TV, Comcast channels, or Catamount Action Television honors local veterans, but they are asking for your permission to place it on our lawn, and I would need a vote of the board to do so.
I would move that we allow that.
All right, any discussion? Sarah, Jim?
Nothing.
Nothing.
Okay, all right. So in that case, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions?
Can I ask one question on the manager's report?
Hang on one sec. Hang on one sec, okay? All right, so that passes. That will be from November 1st through the 30th?
I'm not entirely sure of the actual length of it, but because I came in very late in the discussion, but I'm assuming it's through the month of November, yes.
Okay, all right. We don't generally take questions on the manager's report. I think if you have questions, just connect with Stuart tomorrow. I'm sorry?
The fleet manager, that's been mentioned the last few meetings and never updated.
It's not on
Okay, so we'll put it on the next, fleet manager.
Okay.
We'll make sure that that gets included next month. Thank you.
Okay.
All right.
And if I may, just I know I didn't jump in during the whole discussion on the Ben High Development Project, but if my memory serves me, and my memory doesn't always serve me well, the senior center building was actually a building that was, I believe, donated to the town of Bennington. It sat along the banks of the Walloomsac River behind the stone building, which is now owned by the Bank of Bennington. A HUD grant was utilized to move it and renovate it to be offices for what is now the VNA and Hospice, which was a town program at the time, and the senior center. So one occupied the first floor, the other occupied the second floor. Over time, VNA moved on to its own and is as it is today. The BPI moved in and occupied that space for a time before they were able to expand and move on, and now we have the Seniors and Meals program. So it was never a building that was donated specifically for senior programs, but for a senior center, because those two programs subsisted together to serve the community as a whole.
You're correct, Stu. That was back in the 70s.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so next up, upcoming agendas. Lake Perrin Recreation is on the
Lake
agenda
Perrin
again.
is coming to us.
And that's all that I know about.
That's all that's on the horizon right now.
Oh, there's something on the horizon.
On the horizon, everybody's going to groan. I groaned when I got it.
Oh, yes.
You all probably will remember with a little bit of fear and trepidation the Apple Hill and Chelsea projects that were proposed on across from the Welcome Center. We did just receive a 45-day notice regarding a revised Chelsea project, significantly smaller, but it will be coming before you folks, first before the Planning Commission and then to you folks. And specifically the reason that it was, a couple of reasons. The 45-day notice gives the Planning Commission and the Select Board and others time to make comments about it, but that's really not the main part of their request. They also the Malones, also the developers, also made a request that the Planning Commission and Select Board deem the revised, significantly reduced project as a preferred site. If you recall, one of the criteria for a preferred site, well, if it meets one of many criteria, it doesn't have to meet them all, but if it meets one of several listed criteria, it can be considered a preferred site if it's not on the map already as preferred sites. And the one that they're asking for us to certify is that it's screened, adequately screened by natural vegetation and the elevations from adjacent properties. And they have provided actually fairly convincing simulations that appear to indicate that that is accurate, but the Planning Commission will have a hearing in early November, and it will come to you folks probably your second week in November so that you can determine whether you agree or not with the Planning Commission's recommendation regarding that, and or if you have any other comments that should go to the Public Utilities Commission. So we thought maybe we were done with these projects, but they're back. So at least Chelsea is. So just a heads up for everybody, and I know a lot of folks are interested, but it is, I will say, a significantly reduced project. So we'll see what everybody thinks about it.
Dan, do you know when the Planning Commission is taking it up?
So I don't know for sure. I know that I can say tentatively November 10th. We'll most likely have it in this room. But again, I don't want to say that we don't have that date locked down yet, because frankly, I haven't confirmed that all the Planning Commission members are available then, although I do believe this room is available. So if the Planning Commissioners are available, then we will likely have that hearing on November 10th. And the focus of that hearing will be whether or not it meets the criteria for a preferred site. If it does, then I'm sure the Planning Commission will recommend it. If it doesn't, I'm sure they won't. So that's coming up. The other thing that's coming up that will be coming to you folks is a relatively minor item, but we have talked about it in the past, is a municipal planning grant to start our process of the new town plan, which, as you will recall, the first phase that we hope to do is with the outreach phase, as well as the development of goals and principles and et cetera. So I know BCRC is working on that scope of work now, and they'll also be putting together a municipal planning grant that we'll be bringing to you folks, and hope that you will approve. But I know those two things are coming. There may be others, but those are the ones that I recall. So,
thank you. All right. So, any other business? Gary, any other business?
Just a comment. I would like to just say how disgusting and sad it is for what's happened at our village cemetery, where the headstones were tipped over, broken, and I hope that we can find the people that did it and make them pay. I also wonder if Nancy has the right idea of being able to put some kind of curfew on those at a certain point in the evening or the night that people are not allowed to be in there.
Nothing? Sarah, anything?
No, nothing over here.
Okay.
Jim, anything?
Yes, the sound was pretty muddy with respect to what Gary had to say, but the question that I have for Stu with respect to the cemetery, is there no way that we can put cameras up there? I mean, what was done up there was absolutely despicable. You know, defenseless corpses, and their families' loved ones there. Is there no way, you know, that we can put some cameras up there that can prevent or at least identify these little bastards who did this?
We are actually looking into various security measures at that cemetery. That is a cemetery that has suffered damages many times in the past, and I
didn't
think
hear that clearly.
Pardon me, Jim?
He can't hear you.
Jim, we are looking at various security measures at that cemetery. I'll leave it at that.
Did you hear him?
No. Can you repeat it?
He said he's looking into what they can do up there.
Okay. I mean, this is just the most despicable and horrible thing to be done to our ancestors here in this town, and it cannot happen again. I mean, it's just beyond the pale.
Jean, do you have anything?
This is our last meeting before Election Day. So vote on November 8th. You can walk into the town office and vote. If you haven't mailed in your ballot, you can, maybe I wouldn't mail it at this point. I might drop it off at the town office in the box.
Yeah. Stu, I want to commend Paul Danzero for the report on the play structure up at Willow Park. I did happen to go up there today, and I know I was in a little bit of a rainstorm, a little bit of a sprinkle, but I'd be interested. It is fully expected that MR Dirt will mobilize prior to 10/24. I think it's now 10/24 to start the work, and obviously the company has not started the work. Is there an expected time of starting the dirt? Because the work, I will say, all the schematics show, I mean, that the current status of the curbing is simply unacceptable, and I agree with that 100%. But what's our status?
So, it's a good question. And we expected it. I actually talked to Paul Danzero as well as the Play by Design folks who designed the project and basically the prime contractor.
Right.
So, two things. Play by Design has given up on trying to get any subs in, and they're bringing their own crew in tomorrow. Paul Danzero will be meeting them on site tomorrow, and they will commence the work tomorrow with their very own crew. They've given up on trying to get the subs to do what they should do. So that's number one. Number two is it's a detail most people wouldn't appreciate, but it's actually a good benefit for us. You'll note that the initial curbing was installed. It was precast, curbing where they come in pieces and they install it. What they are proposing now, and they've contracted with an Albany firm, is that they install what's called slip form curbing, which is actually a much better product. Obviously, they're not going to charge us anything more for it, then we're not going to charge us anything for any of this work beyond what we've agreed to pay. And that will actually go in much more quickly than the precast as well. So we know that the work will begin tomorrow, and we know that we'll be getting a better curbing product out of it when it's done. Obviously, right now, it's a race against time because the last portion of this is to pour the poured-in-place rubber surface. So we're hoping like heck that they can get it done as soon as possible, and that we have a couple of nice days in early November to get that done. So that's the latest update. Jonah, I know, is going to be up there taking pictures, so
good. You'll
be able to see that progress tomorrow. And the first step will be removing the precast curb that was inappropriately installed.
Right. That's all that's really helpful, and I hope people get the sense of that. Secondly, I did a little perambulation on the rail trail walk to see how the trestle area is. And I will say, while it's not yet done, it's not completed, I do like the design. I think it's going to work really, really well. And I'm hopeful that that's a project that, I don't want it to be signed off on until it's correct. And so, but I do hope that we'll get a chance to see that project, particularly the paved portion of it. I will say, I wish I had taken a picture just this afternoon looking down the long length. It's just gorgeous. So thank you for everybody who's worked on that.
Great. Okay. I think we're nearing the end of this meeting. Could I have a motion to adjourn?
So, second.
All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? No. Thank you.
Nope.
Thank you all.